Hi everybody, we're Shleter Tracker and we're a bunch of high schoolers from Yangon, Myanmar. We're competing in UNGlobal Pulse Big Data Competition for Climate Action.
Myanmar Shleter Tracker is an interactive application to combat inadequate shelter accessibility by not only tracking evacuation pattern, time and distance individuals take before reaching each shelter, but also by providing information on availability of resources and space in shelter camps, along with other assisting features such as logistics on evacuation routes and interactive alert systems to identify and monitor issues relating to shelter accessibility and natural disaster evacuations.
When a disaster first strikes, everybody begins to panic, and the first priority is to either evacuate or reach a safe location. This is very difficult and very dangerous without proper information, which is why there are many unnecessary deaths and casualties. However, this is also why Shleter Tracker is a necessity. Not only does it provide information on the safest and shortest route to shelters, it also provides information on shelters themselves, which is essential for the government to make policies on shelters.
Over 1 million people were critically affected by the extreme flood in 2015 in Myanmar. Over 100 people also lost their lives. People were left with empty hands as their homes and belongings were buried and washed away in mud. With an agricultural economy in Myanmar, people face many hardships and difficulties. Millions of acres of farmlands were destroyed, damaging the crops and arable land that poses a risk to long-term food security.
When there is a disaster, people get evacuated. However, there's a lack of information on shelter location and distance, shelter availability and resources, traffic and hazards on roads, on shelters. So to combat these things, we need an application that solves all these issues when evacuation is happening and when there's natural disaster strike and we need to evacuate. So Shleter Tracker is an application that solves all these problems for the users, for the citizens, and also for governments to implement on their actions.
So how does the application actually work? So we have our first feature, the main feature. It's the Shleter Tracker feature. So the Shleter Tracker feature includes many options for the shelter. It pinpoints the shelter's location on a map, and then it also includes the distance from you, the type of shelter, the number of people currently in the shelter capacity, whether the status is open or not, and even an estimation of food. So the types of data we are sharing and gathering in the application includes the shelter capacity, the number of people in the shelter, resources in the shelter, location of the shelter. All these 4 items are gathered from the shelter, the people from the shelter, like an authoritative person from the shelter, and then it is used to help users. And then the second type of data gathering process is from the public to help users. So we're gonna use public data such as Google Maps, and then the Google Maps also give you the distance from your current location, GPS. By using GPS, we can determine the distance from you and the shelter. And then lastly, we have the data that's gathered from users to helpers, to shelters. So by getting the data of the user's time, evacuation pattern, and a person, and the distance a person take to reach a shelter, we can actually triangulate like its evacuation pattern before it reaches the shelter, and then it can help us determine better ways and better means of improving their evacuation means of methods. So this is gonna be gathered through the location of the user by GPS. Shleter Tracker provide assist to both users and the government from the data gathered. For example, Shleter Tracker's main feature for users and affected citizens include the benefits of even distribution of people. So if people know the capacity of the capacity of the shelter and know how many people are in there, they might know that if a shelter is full or not. They might choose to go to another shelter, or they might choose to go to a farther shelter because they have less people in it. And then the Shleter Tracker also include a location point where the evacuator might not even know a shelter exists before in their location, and they might not even have to travel very far places to go to get their available shelter. So this is how Shelter Helper is helping users in one way. As a result, there are no cluster spaces in shelter and resources are evenly distributed, and then shelters can even reach to their even empty shelters will have more shelter after this application, and shelter that feels so cluster might have less people in it because shelters each other can communicate, and maybe they can even send some of their people to other shelters to help out, or even to evenly distribute the people or the resources in each and every shelter. So this is how Shleter Tracker create like a platform for shelters and users to communicate to each other and proceed doing in times of emergency where everybody is in need of each other's help, and help is really important. Another way is for Shleter Tracker's main feature for government and organization by using big data. So the big data will be acquired by using GPS to track the migration/evacuation pattern, time, distance individuals take to reach shelter camps. The GPS will be able to triangulate the amount of people in common areas where people are most delayed. So by getting this information, governments can, from the big data of the number of people in the shelter, the capacity of the shelter, and the distance and the time people take to reach their shelter, their migration pattern, government can decide whether to implement more shelters in area that needs or that might not need. And then from the data of the shelter location and its resources, government and organizations can better allocate their donation. They might notice that in some areas there are more shelters, and in some areas there might be less shelters. And then, as I have mentioned above, we also included the information of the resources in each and every shelter, so government can now see which shelter need the most aid. And then there are sometimes even shelters that governments and organizations do not know they exist, and they really need help from government and organization. In this app, those shelters that have been hidden and unknown can actually be brought into light and brought into attention by this application, and government and organizations can help many of once unknown before this application. And now these kind of shelters will be known to the public and known to everybody to access, and government and organizations to help. And then the application will use the GPS tracker to collect data on evacuation pattern, time, distance user take before reaching a shelter camp. So government can even implement more evacuation routes to shelters so that they can reach even faster.
Shleter Tracker's assisting feature also provides information of the logistics on evacuation routes using the route system for the users and affected citizens. The route system in the interactive application will allow people to evacuate the route by choosing the closest evacuation route. This gives the users a shorter time to reach their destination, saving their time, yet still provides a precise information. With a route system, people know the traffic and the congestion evacuators, and thus can make decisions early in times of emergency cases. They would not have any delay. Furthermore, it also allows people to evacuate fast by avoiding congested routes such as extreme traffic. Shleter Tracker provides the information with different key colors. This way, users could avoid route that is blocked and choose an alternative route. Additionally, the application also provides a new route that users can choose to reach their destination. The route system also provides information of the evacuation routes for government and organization in order to help the users and citizens in affected areas. This route system is helpful for external helpers such as rescue parties that can easily assess shelter camps and provide the necessary help that the affected people require. With the access to Shleter Tracker, government can easily identify hotspots where traffic occurs often. Therefore, they could build up more ideas to create a better community for the affected citizens, such as implementing policies to reduce traffic and building more shelters in the region where the traveling time is too long. Shleter Tracker also has an additional assisting feature, alert systems, to identify and monitor issues relating to the accessibility of shelter and natural disaster evacuation.
Shleter Tracker's assistant feature alerts and alert systems for users and affected citizens are a countermeasure against hazards and dangers when people are trying to reach a safe location. People who are trapped in hazardous areas can send alerts requesting help to nearby places. What this does is that whenever somebody is trapped, it allows them to send out a signal for help, which makes it easier for people that are on the outside to give and provide help to people that are stuck inside. Governments can easily identify these hotspots and where these alerts are from by using this application. Another essential thing is that the big data is used to triangulate the amount of people, distance, time, and common areas where individuals are most delayed in reaching to available shelter. For instance, the GPS tracker is used to track the migration patterns, as well as the amount of time and the amount of distance that people have to travel to reach a shelter. This is essential because in areas where there are too many people and too little shelters, the government it will immediately be notified by the application what areas have a large disparity between the amount of shelter and the amount of people there. This is part of the big data, which is used by the application to provide more information. This is further supported by information on shelters and the amount of resources that certain shelters have. So not only does the application notify how many people and how many shelters there are, it also notifies the outside world about how much resources or what a lack of resources there are in certain areas. This will make it easier to distribute resources equally across certain areas and be able to maximize efficiency. Of course, the overall priority of this application is the safety of all people. The biggest problem during natural disasters is that there is a lack of information, which makes it very, very difficult for people to get through. This application's priorities is to safely guide people and avoid hazards and make them reach their shelter location. All of this contributes to the central theme of the application, which is to create a network of communication between shelter, citizens, and the government.